500 people watched that cover come off, and every one of them looked at the damage. Everyone but her. She wasn't looking at the damage at all. She was looking at the corner. She almost walked right past it. Just a guy, a crate, an elevator, but the way he waved her off, too fast, too nervous. Later, it was all she could think about. That label was in her hand for maybe 4 seconds. Then someone very calm, very polite, slipped it right out of her fingers and promised she'd take care of everything herself. Nobody argued with her. They just lifted the badge off her neck and turned her toward the door. She got one sentence out before they walked her out of the room. 11 minutes. That's how much of the footage just wasn't there. Gone. And outside, down at the loading dock, something had been sitting there the whole time. Engine running. She came back through those doors with one folder in her hand. Then the screen behind the stage changed, and every single person in that room slowly turned to look at the same face. There's a painting on that wall, and half the room has their hand over their mouth. Dark streaks running down the whole top of it, like something bled through the varnish. Ruined, that's the word going around. And the woman who spent the better part of a year saving it, Adele, she hasn't moved an inch. Everyone's looking at the damage. She's not. Her eyes have gone somewhere else. Down to the bottom corner, this little spot only she thinks to check. And whatever she's looking for, it isn't there. Rewind a few hours. Same building that morning, down in the service corridor. Nora was just passing through when she caught him, the young intern, wrestling a big wooden crate into the freight elevator. Nothing to it, really. People move things all day in a place like that. Except the second he clocked her standing there, his whole face changed. Didn't say a word. Just pushed the crate in and stepped in after it. Fast, like the walls were closing. The doors shut. She stood there a beat, shrugged, kept walking. She thinks about that moment a lot now. Let's go back to where the day actually started. Nora wasn't staff. She was a volunteer just for the day, a student clocking hours at the big unveiling, the kind of thing that looks good on an application. The head of security caught her at the door and handed her a badge on a lanyard. Older guy, warm, been there 30 years. Knew every hallway, every locked room, every camera in the place. Gonna be a big day, he told her. He had no idea. Neither did she. The restorer's name was Adele, 26, and already trusted with the most valuable thing in the building, which, if you know how these places work, basically never happens that young. 8 months she'd lived with this one painting, cleaning it, mending it, coaxing it back a little at a time. That morning she pulled the cover off and showed Nora, and you could see it on her. This wasn't a job to her. Her hands hovered near the canvas like it might still be wet. Everything she'd worked for was sitting on that easel. Then she leaned in and pointed at something tiny, right down in the corner. A repair so small you'd miss it, shaped a bit like a little crescent moon. She'd fixed it that same morning. Her own private mark, in a way. 2 people on this earth knew it was there. Her and the girl standing next to her. And because Adele documented every step, she was young, she had things to prove, Nora lifted her phone and took a close-up. Didn't think twice about it. That one photo ends up mattering more than anything else in this whole story. Around midday, the curator came down to the studio. All smiles. Told Adele the board couldn't be prouder, that giving her this painting was the best call they'd made in years. Nice words. Adele lit up. Who wouldn't? But here's the thing you only catch later, watching it back in your head. Handing that painting to the youngest person in the building wasn't some act of faith, it was a choice. And there was a reason behind it. A cold one. Off to the side, one of the museum's biggest patrons pulled the curator in close. You couldn't hear it from across the room, but you didn't need to. The body language said plenty. Word was, the place was in trouble. Money trouble, the kind nobody says out loud at a party like this. And tonight, this unveiling, all these cameras, this was supposed to fix it. Everything was riding on one painting going perfectly. Everything. Meanwhile, downstairs, the intern got a message. We'll call him Simon. Young guy, first real job, still trying to prove he belonged there. The message told him to move a specific crate, code C17, down to the loading dock. Routine, as far as he knew. A security check, they'd said, signed off by the board. So he did what he was told. Because when you're the new kid, you don't ask questions. You just say yes. Nora passed back through that corridor a little later. The crate was still there, sitting by the elevator. She noticed the label on the side, half torn, hard to read. Barely registered it, honestly. Just a crate in a hallway full of crates. She had somewhere to be, so she kept moving. And that right there is the part that would keep her up later. She walked right past the whole thing. Twice, actually. So now we're back to after. The painting's ruined, Adele's been walked out, and Nora's badge is gone. The security guard, the same warm guy from that morning, he's supposed to show her the door. And he does. Sort of. He walks her to it, then just stops, doesn't open it. 30 years I've worked here, he says, quiet. I know who does what in this building. He looks at her. 5 minutes. Far as I'm concerned, you never left. So Nora doesn't leave. She's got 5 minutes in a hallway full of questions. And the first person she goes looking for is that intern, Simon. She finds him near the lobby, moving fast, head down, like he'd rather be anywhere else. She steps right in front of him. The crate, she says. This morning, what was in it? And you can watch it happen on his face. That little flicker. The one people get when the truth is right there and they've decided not to say it. He won't look at her. His jaw's working like he's chewing on something he can't spit out. She's not accusing him of anything yet. She doesn't even know what there is to accuse him of. But something in her gut has started ringing. Loud. And it won't quit. It was empty, he says. Just packing stuff. Bubble wrap, foam, whatever. And then he's gone. Walking off before she can get another word in. Too quick. That's the thing. When someone's telling the truth, they don't need to rush it. He did. Nora stands there watching him disappear into the crowd, and she's turning it over. Packing materials. Okay. Except she remembers the way he shoved that crate into the elevator this morning. The way it didn't budge easy. The way he leaned into it. You don't strain like that against a box of bubble wrap. Something heavy was in there. Something he lied about 10 seconds ago without even blinking. And here's what really got her. He didn't ask why she wanted to know. A person with nothing to hide would have asked. She goes back down to that corridor. Same one from the morning. The crate's gone now. Of course it is. But she's not looking for the crate. She's looking for anything it left behind. And there, on the floor by the elevator, half under a pipe, she spots it. A scrap of paper. A shipping label torn right down the middle. She crouches, picks it up, turns it toward the light. Most of it's ripped away. But there's a number printed across the top. An inventory code. The kind museums put on everything they own. so they always know where a piece is. Now why, she thinks, would a crate full of empty packing foam have an inventory code on it? You don't tag bubble wrap, you tag the thing inside. And that thing, whatever it was, mattered enough to track. She barely has time to think it through before a voice behind her says her name. Warm, friendly. It's the curator, the one running the whole evening. She glances down at the label in Nora's hand and, smooth as anything, reaches out and just takes it. "Oh, I'll handle this, sweetheart. You've had a rough night. Go on home." And it's all so kind, so reasonable. That's what makes it work. Nora almost hands it over and walks away. Almost. But there's this half second where their eyes meet, and behind all that warmth, there's something cold, something watching. The curator's fingers close around that scrap of paper a little too fast, a little too eager, and Nora notices. She doesn't say anything, but she notices. Because you don't rush to grab a piece of trash, unless it isn't trash. So Nora goes over the curator's head. She finds the patron, the wealthy one, the one who basically keeps the lights on in this place. If anyone can stop things and actually listen, it's her. Nora lays it out. The crate, the lie, the torn label with the code on it. And the older woman listens, really listens, nodding along, this soft, concerned look on her face. And for a second, Nora thinks, finally, someone believes me. Then the woman takes her hand, gentle, grandmotherly. "Sweetheart," she says, "do you have any idea what a scandal like this would do? To all of us? This museum is hanging by a thread. One rumor tonight and it's over. People lose their jobs. Please, let it go." And just like that, the one person with the power to help her asked her to stay quiet. Okay. So the curator took her label. Fine. But Nora had already read the number on it. And numbers, she figured, don't just exist once. If that crate had a shipping label, there had to be a record of it somewhere. A copy, a duplicate, something. So she goes down to the loading area, the place Simon was hauling that crate toward all morning. And it's quiet now. Empty. Just crates and bubble wrap and a couple of big recycling bins shoved against the wall. And she starts digging, hands right in the trash, pulling out torn paper, packing slips, all of it. Most of it's junk. And then, there, half crushed at the bottom. Another label, same style, same torn edge, and that same inventory code stamped across the top. But here's the part that stopped her cold. This one had something the first one didn't. A destination. A drop-off address, printed right there in black and white. The museum's most valuable painting, the one supposedly hanging ruined on that wall upstairs, had a shipping label, with somewhere to go. Now you don't ship a painting that's on display. You don't ship a painting that's been destroyed. You ship a painting that somebody's planning to move. Quietly. Tonight, she finds Simon again, and this time she's not asking nicely. Holds up the label right in his face. "Empty packing, huh? Then how come the box has a delivery address on it?" And whatever color was left in that kid drains right out. He opens his mouth, closes it. Nothing. And okay, I know how this looks. You're watching this going. It's him, obviously, right? He moved the crate, he lied, he won't even look at her. Done. Wrapped up. That's what Nora thought too for about half a second. But something didn't sit right. He wasn't acting guilty. He was acting scared, which, trust me, is a whole different animal. Guilty people talk. They've always got a story. Simon just stood there shaking like a kid who'd waded out too far and only now noticed the ground was gone. She didn't have the full picture yet, but her gut already knew. Simon wasn't who she was after. He was just the poor kid holding the door for whoever was. That's when the guard finds her. Same guy. The one who gave her 5 minutes and swore she never left. Only now he's not calm. Something's changed in his face, and he grabs her by the arm, quiet, fast. Come on, there's something you gotta see. Takes her back to the security office, that cramped little room full of monitors nobody ever thinks about. And he's talking low the whole way there. Turns out he'd been chewing on this too. The freight elevator. Somebody ran it this morning and never logged it, which you just don't do. Not in a building full of stuff worth more than your house. And then there was the dock. Out back, the big roll-up door. It shuts on a timer every night, locks down tight. And whatever's parked out there when it does? Gone. Long gone. He stops and looks at her. Truck's been sitting at that dock a while now. Engine running the whole time, and that door drops any minute. And Nora's stomach just bottomed out. Because if the real painting was in that truck, this wasn't a tonight problem anymore. This was a right now problem. Inside the security room, he pulls up the footage. The camera that covers the storage hallway, right where that crate came from. And he scrubs it back to the afternoon, and they watch. And at first, it's nothing. Empty hallway. Time code ticking along in the corner, second by second, totally normal. And then, it jumps. 1 second the clock reads one thing, and the very next frame it's 11 minutes later. Just gone. 11 whole minutes. Missing, like somebody reached in and scooped them out. Nora leaned in closer. "Can footage just do that?" she asked. And the guard shook his head slow. "No," he said. "Somebody deleted it. On purpose." 11 minutes. That's all it takes. To wheel one crate out, wheel an identical one in, and walk away like nothing happened. And whoever did it knew exactly which camera to blind and exactly how to blind it. This wasn't some panic mistake. This was planned, careful, by somebody who knew this building's security inside and out. Nora stared at that frozen screen, at the truck sitting out on the dock, waiting. And it all started clicking into place. The ruined painting upstairs. The crate. The missing minutes. None of it was an accident. Somebody built this, piece by piece. And they were almost home free. And then it hit her. Right there in that dark little room, staring at the monitors, it hit her so hard she actually reached for her phone. Because here's what she suddenly remembered. That morning, the studio. Adele leaning in, pointing at that tiny crescent-shaped repair down in the corner of the painting. The one she'd fixed just hours before. The one only the two of them knew about. And Nora had taken a photo of it. A close-up. It was still sitting right there in her camera roll. She pulled it up with shaking hands. There it was. The real painting that morning, with a little crescent mark clear as day. Then she thought about the painting hanging upstairs. The ruined one. The one everybody was gasping at. If that was really Adele's painting, the mark would be there. Somewhere under all those stains, in that exact corner, it would be there. But if it wasn't there, if that corner was blank, then the thing on the wall wasn't Adele's work at all. It was a fake, a stand-in. And the real one was sitting in a truck out back with the engine running. One photo, that's what it came down to. One photo she almost never took, and now it was the only proof she had. So here's the problem. Nora's got a photo on her phone of the real painting's corner, that little crescent mark. But a photo on a phone? Anybody could say she faked it, snapped it off some other painting. She needed the original. The one Adele shot in the studio that morning, saved straight to the museum's own system. Time-stamped, official. The kind of thing nobody could wave away. Trouble is, that studio was locked. Had been since they hauled Adele out. And Nora's just a volunteer with no badge and no keys. But the guard? 30 years on the job. He's got keys to doors most people don't even know exist. He swipes them in, the lock clicks, and they're inside. Lights off. Just the glow of Adele's monitor still humming in the dark. Nora goes straight for it, and her hands are shaking now because she knows they're running out of road. She pulls up the studio's photo archive, scrolls to that morning, and there, a whole folder. Every step of the restoration, documented, dated, exactly like Adele always did it. And near the end, the close-ups. That crescent repair, sharp and clear, logged into the system hours before the unveiling. She holds her phone up next to the screen. Her photo. Adele's photo. Same mark, same spot, same painting. Proof it existed. Proof it was real. Now all she had to do was get to the painting on the wall and check if that mark was there too. Because if it wasn't, everything she'd pieced together tonight was true. And there was maybe one person left in this whole building who could still open the right doors fast enough to matter. Standing right beside her, and that's when Simon breaks. He'd been trailing them, hovering, chewing his nails down to nothing. And finally, the whole thing just pours out of him. Turns out he never knew. Not really. Earlier that day, the curator had pulled him aside, real friendly, real casual, and told him there was a security drill happening, a test. They needed a crate quietly moved from the studio down to the dock. No fuss, no logging it, just keep it off the books. Board approved, she said. Hush, hush. And Simon? First real job, desperate to look reliable, terrified of messing up. He said yes. Of course he said yes. He didn't ask why. You don't ask why when you're 23 and trying to keep the only good thing you've got going. It wasn't till the painting came off, that wall looking wrecked, till he saw Adele hauled out crying, that it hit him what he'd actually done. He'd carried it out himself, with his own 2 hands. He was shaking telling her this. I didn't know, he kept saying. I swear I didn't know. And here's the thing. Nora believed him, because she'd seen it on his face from the start. That wasn't a criminal. That was a scared kid who got used. And now the guilt was eating him alive. But she didn't have time to comfort him, not yet. Because Simon knew one more thing. The thing that mattered most. He knew exactly where that second crate had ended up, where they'd stashed the real painting after the swap. Down at the loading dock, in the truck, the one with the engine running, the one about to drive off into the night and disappear for good. They run. All 3 of them, straight down to the dock, and Nora's heart is going 100 miles an hour because they can already hear it, that low diesel rumble, the truck idling, ready to roll. The driver's in the seat, the gate's halfway up. Another minute and it's gone, out into traffic, swallowed by the city, and that painting's on its way to some private buyer who'll bury it in a vault where nobody sees it again for 50 years. And this is the moment where you'd think, okay, how does a college kid and a security guard stop a truck? They don't. Not by force. But the guard, he doesn't need force. He's got something better. He knows this building. He walks straight to the wall panel by the dock, the one controlling the big roll-up gate, and slams his palm on the button. And that heavy steel door comes grinding down. Right in front of the truck, metal on concrete, boom, sealed shut. The driver hits the horn, leans out the window yelling, but there's nowhere to go. The exit's blocked. The truck's trapped inside the dock with all of them. And just like that, the whole plan, the swap, the timing, the missing minutes, all of it, comes screeching to a stop over one button that one man knew was there. The driver kills the engine, climbs out. And he's looking around at a security guard, a shaking intern, and a 20-year-old in a red hoodie. And you can see him doing the math, realizing this isn't going the way he was told it would. Nora steps toward the back of the truck. Time to see what was really inside. They get the back of the truck open. And there it is. One crate strapped down, padded on every side. The guard pries the lid loose, and Simon helps him lift it. And Nora leans in with her phone light. And her breath just catches. Because inside, wrapped in foam, safe and sound, is the painting. The real one. Not a scratch on it. Not a single stain. Gorgeous, glowing, exactly the way Adele left it that morning. The one hanging upstairs, the ruined one everybody gasped at, the one they blamed her for. That was the fake. A decoy. Painted up to look wrecked so nobody would ever come looking for the original. And the whole point of ruining it, of the public disaster, of dragging Adele's name through the mud. So that when this painting vanished, the story would already be written. Tragic accident. Restorer botched the job. Case closed. Nobody hunts for a masterpiece everyone thinks was destroyed. It was clever. Genuinely clever. Nora crouches down, and with her hands trembling, she checks the corner. The bottom corner. And there it is. That tiny crescent mark. The repair Adele made that morning. The one only the two of them knew about. Right where it should be. This was Adele's painting. The real thing. Proof, sitting right in front of her, that everything she'd been screaming about all night was true. But saving the painting was only half of it. Upstairs, 500 people still thought Adele was a fraud who destroyed a masterpiece. The cameras were still rolling. The story was still spreading. And Nora knew a rescued painting in a truck downstairs meant nothing if she couldn't get it in front of that room, now. So Nora doesn't wait. She's got the proof now. The folder from the studio, the time-stamped photos, the whole story finally lined up in her head. And she moves. Fast. Back up through the building, toward the gala hall, where the lights are still blazing and the cameras are still rolling, and 500 people are still standing around whispering about the poor young restorer who wrecked a priceless painting. And with every step, the guard's words are ringing in her ears. The board runs this place. The curator answers to them. And the patron, the wealthy one who begged Nora to stay quiet, she's got a seat on that board too. These are powerful people. The kind who can make a 20-year-old volunteer disappear from the story with a single phone call. Nora knew that. She knew walking into that room with wet hands and a phone full of photos meant putting herself right in front of all of them. And a smarter, safer version of her might have just called the police and waited outside. But there wasn't time for safe. The longer that fake painting hung on the wall, the longer Adele's name burned. Every minute that passed, the lie got more permanent. Someone had to walk in there and rip the whole thing open in front of everybody. The press, the board, the cameras, all of it. Before the story set like concrete. And the only person in that building who knew the entire truth, start to finish, was a tired college kid in a red hoodie who'd started the day handing out programs. She took a breath at the door, and she pushed it open, so she walks in, right into the middle of it. 500 people in black tie, cameras rolling, the fake painting still hanging up there like a headstone with Adele's name on it. And this kid in a red hoodie just stops, dead center of the room. And people start to notice. Heads turn. That murmur you get when something's off. Now Nora's not a speaker. She's 20, her hands are sweating, and she's about to accuse some very powerful people of something huge in front of the entire press. But she's got the folder. And she asks, loud enough for the room, for someone to put her photos up on the big screen. And maybe it's the nerve of it, maybe it's the look on her face, but somebody does. And there it is, 10 feet tall behind the stage. 2 images, side by side. On the left, the painting on the wall, that ruined one. Corner blown up huge. Blank, nothing there. On the right, Adele's photo from that morning, same corner. And that little crescent mark plain as day. Same painting, supposedly. One's got the mark, one doesn't. And you can feel the whole room go quiet, that specific kind of quiet, as 500 people slowly do the math. The painting on the wall isn't the real one. It can't be. And Simon, bless him, steps up beside her, shaking, and tells them the rest. The crate, the drill that wasn't a drill, what he carried out and who told him to carry it. A scared kid telling the truth in front of a room full of people who could end him. And that's the thing about the truth. Once it's out loud in front of everyone, you can't stuff it back in the box. And now, everybody's looking at one person. The curator. The one running the whole night, the one who'd taken the label right out of Nora's hand, who told Simon it was just a harmless little drill. She's standing near the front, and for a second she tries it. The smile, the calm voice. This is all a misunderstanding. Let's not make a scene. But it doesn't land. Not this time. Because the proof is 10 feet tall behind her, and the intern's already talked, and you can watch it happen in real time. The room turning against her. It comes out over the next few minutes, piece by piece. She was the one who insisted Adele get the painting, not out of kindness. Because Adele was new, alone, nobody's favorite. The perfect person to pin it on if anything went sideways. She was the one who ordered the swap, who knew which camera to kill and when. The whole disaster tonight, Adele's public ruin, all of it. Set dressing. A story built so that when the real painting quietly vanished, everyone would already have someone to blame and no reason to go looking. She'd sell it off to a private buyer, pocket a fortune, and the museum, drowning in debt, would collapse into the mess and never know what actually walked out the back door. It was cold, and it very nearly worked. The board members are on their feet now, closing in around her, quiet and grim. Nobody's shouting. Nobody has to. She's just standing there, out of smiles, out of story, watching the whole thing come apart in front of the exact crowd she'd built it to fool. And then somebody brings Adele back in. They'd had her tucked away in some side room this whole time, alone, thinking her career was over before it started. Thinking the one painting she'd poured 8 months into was destroyed, and it was all her fault. And she walks in, red-eyed, bracing for the worst. And instead, the whole room turns to look at her. Not with suspicion this time, with something closer to shame. because every single person who'd gasped at her, who'd whispered, who'd watched security walk her out like a criminal, they'd just been shown, in 10-foot letters, exactly how wrong they were. Nora goes to her, puts a hand on her shoulder, and tells her quietly that the real painting's fine. Safe. Downstairs, not a scratch on it. That crescent mark she fixed that morning. It's the whole reason any of this got uncovered. The tiniest little repair, the kind nobody would ever notice. That's what saved her. And you can see it hit Adele in waves. The relief, the disbelief. The fact that some volunteer she'd met that morning, some kid handing out programs, had spent the worst night of her life fighting for a stranger when it would have been so much easier to just go home. Adele doesn't even have words for it. She just grabs Nora and holds on. And around them the room's already shifting, the apologies starting, the board scrambling, the press swarming. But for 1 second, in the middle of all that noise, it's just the two of them. The restorer who almost lost everything, and the girl who wouldn't let her. Now here's the part I didn't see coming. Remember the wealthy patron? The one who took Nora's hands earlier and begged her to keep quiet, to protect the museum, to let it go? Everyone figured she'd slip out the side door the second things went bad. That's what people like her usually do. But she doesn't. She walks up to the podium instead, takes the microphone, and in front of the cameras, in front of everyone, she stops the whole broadcast. And she tells the truth. All of it. That the museum had been drowning in debt. That she'd suspected for weeks something wasn't right and told herself it wasn't her business. That when this girl came to her earlier with the truth in her hands, she'd chosen the institution over the person, and she'd been wrong too. Dead wrong. She says it plain, no excuses, standing there in front of the people whose opinion she'd spent a lifetime managing. And it costs her something to do it. You can see that. But she does it anyway. Because a 20-year-old in a hoodie had just shown the entire room what it looks like to do the hard right thing instead of the easy quiet one. And it would have been pretty hard to sit there and watch that and still choose the coward's way out. She makes sure, on the record, that Adele's name is cleared completely, that the real painting's recovered, that the people responsible answer for it. And when she's done, she looks out at Nora across that whole crowded room and gives her this small nod. One that says, "You were right. And I should have listened." Hours later, everybody's gone. The cameras, the crowd, the noise, all of it packed up and cleared out. The board took over what was left. The people who did this will answer for it, in the ways those things get answered for. And the museum. Turns out a scandal like this brings a strange kind of attention. Donors came out of the woodwork. The place that was quietly dying is somehow going to make it. Funny how that works. But that's all for later. Right now, it's just the two of them. Adele and Nora, standing in this huge empty hall, everything cleaned up and put away. The chairs are stacked. There's one lonely program sitting on the floor where somebody dropped it. And up on the wall, back where it belongs, under one soft light. The real painting, safe, whole. That little crescent mark down in the corner, right where it's supposed to be. They don't really say much. What is there to say? Adele had spent 8 months bringing that painting back to life. And tonight she almost lost it. And her name, and everything she'd worked for, and a girl she'd known for less than a day just didn't let that happen. So they stand there. 2 people, 1 painting, and this enormous quiet. And you think about how close it came. How easy it would have been for Nora to hand over that badge, walk out that door, and never look back. Nobody would have blamed her. But she didn't. She stayed. She looked closer. And because she did, the truth still hanging on the wall, right where everyone can see it.